If you're looking to change your lifestyle, but you're not really sure that you have the motivation to keep with it for the rest of your life, this video is for you. I'm going to show you how to do just that, so stay tuned. Welcome back to this final video on motivation. In the last video, we talked about goals and setbacks. This week, we're going to be talking about using the power of habits instead of willpower to keep you on track, about cost versus benefit, about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, about a little something called self-efficacy, and finally, a few tips about tracking your progress. And let's get started with willpower versus habits. In that last video, we talked about how setbacks could kill your motivation and block further progress. Let's face it, staying on track and not allowing setbacks to become a roadblock takes willpower. But willpower comes in finite amounts, and you can actually exhaust your willpower. You can run out of it. There's this phenomenon called decision fatigue, and it's when, after a long day of making difficult decisions, it becomes much more grueling to keep making good choices. Here's the thing. Willpower requires conscious thought. You have to analyze the situation, determine what your choices are, decide which choice is optimal, and then make that choice. But there's a better way, one that is a lot less fatiguing. Instead of using willpower, use the power of habits. Habits are defined as non-reflective, repetitive behavior. And the key here is non-reflective, meaning that you don't have to think about it. This notion of acting without thinking about it is called automaticity, and it's what drives habits. If we go back to the example of doing HIIT that I used in my last video, when I first started, I rarely met my goals. And not so much because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't remember to do it. I'd go through the day and not even think about it. I finally had to set a daily reminder on my computer to remind me to do a session of HIIT. But after doing HIIT for over 3 years now, remembering to do HIIT has become automatic. It's something that I do without even thinking about it. But how long does it take to make a new behavior into a habit? In a study conducted at University College London, 96 participants were asked to select an everyday behavior that they wanted to turn into a habit and to keep a log for 84 days. And some really interesting data emerged. On average, it took 66 days until a new habit was formed. But it turns out that not all habits are created equal. How long it takes to turn a behavior into a habit depends on what the behavior is. The more difficult the behavior, the longer it takes to achieve automaticity. Drinking a glass of water after breakfast only took 20 days until it became a habit. Walking for 10 minutes after breakfast took 50 days. And 50 sit-ups after morning coffee was still not a habit after the full 84 days. However, they were able to extrapolate the data out over time and discovered that any behavior, no matter how difficult, can achieve full automaticity and become a habit within about 8 or 9 months. But what's interesting is that when the researchers plotted the data, they found a curved relationship between habits and automaticity. It was the earliest repetitions that were the most beneficial in establishing a habit, with gains diminishing over time. Which means that as you work to turn a behavior that you can't consciously choose into a habit that you don't even have to think about, it gets easier over time. If you can just get through that initial phase of choosing the behavior and doing it, it'll eventually get easier and easier, until eventually you don't have to think about it at all. But here's the thing, and this is important: baby steps. The brain isn't wired to make big sweeping changes. That's what keeps it stable. So don't decide to instill 3 or 4 radical changes in your lifestyle as new habits, because if you're like most of us, you'll never succeed. But small, incremental changes, the brain is designed to handle those with ease. It's all about building new neural pathways in your brain. This is called neuroplasticity, and it's something that your brain can do right up to the moment you die, regardless of your age. Now, neuroplasticity can decline with age, but that's more because of the fact that most people don't exercise their brains than due to any age-related damage. The more you build new neural pathways, the more the brain has the capacity to do so. The key to building new habits is baby steps. Keep it small. Don't try to make the changes too big or too many. Let's say that you want to take doing push-ups from something that you never think of to something that's a habit. Which do you think you're more likely to do every day? A single push-up or 100 push-ups? If you're trying to make doing push-ups a habit, committing to doing 100 push-ups a day is going to take tremendous willpower, and it's going to take it every day. Some days you'll have that willpower, and some days you won't. So you won't do it every day. But if you commit to doing a single push-up every day, it's much more likely that you'll do that push-up every day. And that's what creates new neural pathways. Consistency. A neuron fires down a pathway in your brain as a trigger or cue, and you perform a behavior. You get some type of positive feedback, and that feedback and that pathway is strengthened, is reinforced. Every time you repeat that behavior, even if it's only a single push-up, that pathway is strengthened. Now, it may be small, but over time, it adds up. Going back to my example of doing HIIT. Remember that little voice that I was talking about? The voice that told me that I didn't have to work out, and how I was trying to turn not listening to that voice into a habit? If I didn't listen to that voice and I worked out instead, then right after that workout, I'd feel great that I hadn't listened to that voice and that I now had another workout under my belt. And every time that happened, it would reinforce the habit of ignoring the voice. Not much, but after 3.5 years of doing that, the amount of reinforcement that had piled up is substantial. So break any new radical behavior into a bunch of small steps and work to build those small new habits over time. Just keep plugging away. Now, let's back up for a minute. In describing how a habit is formed in your brain, I just mentioned that upon performing that new behavior, you get some type of positive feedback. This positive feedback is a reward. Now, there are several types of rewards. There are external rewards called extrinsic rewards, and there are internal or intrinsic rewards. An example of an extrinsic reward would be a cheat day. You stay on track for several days or weeks, and you reward yourself with a cheat day. Looking forward to that cheat day can go a long ways towards staying on track. But over the long haul, this type of reward system can backfire. Science has shown that an intrinsic reward goes much further than an outward type of reward. Psychology has demonstrated that the more you use extrinsic or outward rewards like a cheat day, the more it weakens your intrinsic motivation. So what is intrinsic motivation? If you are doing something because you like it, you enjoy doing it, that's intrinsic motivation. You're being motivated from inside because you enjoy doing it rather than being motivated by an external reward. But what if the thing that you're trying to turn into a new habit isn't something that you enjoy? Because let's face it, there are just some things that are never going to be enjoyable, no matter if they become habits or not. And for me, that's exercising. I've never enjoyed working out, and I never will. It may become a habit, but not one that I'll ever enjoy doing. This is where a little mental acrobatics is required. We have to do a cost-benefit calculation. Now, this is something that we do all the time, whether we're conscious of it or not. Eleanor Simpson and Peter Balsam of the New York Psychiatric Institute studied motivation and published a paper called The Behavioral Neuroscience of Motivation in 2016. Now, in this paper, they laid out a concept which aligns with a long-held belief of my own, which is that in every action that we as human beings take, there are two motivating factors. One is the avoidance of some type of pain, and the other is to gain some type of pleasure. The pain, whether it's a physical pain, an emotional pain, a financial pain, whatever it is, that's the cost. The pleasure is the benefit, the reward. Let's take that single push-up. The cost is the amount of energy that we have to expend to perform the push-up. And let's face it, the cost is a lot less if we're only doing a single push-up rather than 100 push-ups. But it's also the mental energy that we have to expend to make the decision to perform that push-up. Again, a lot less if it's a single push-up. The reward is the small amount of strength that we might have gained from the push-up, but more importantly, it's the satisfaction of having done something that we promised ourselves we were going to do, something that we don't usually do. And in most cases, that boost to our ego far outweighs the small price that we paid to do the push-up. Like I said, we do cost-benefit calculations all the time. If the cost is larger than the benefit, the action or behavior is probably not going to be something that we're going to do. But if the reward is substantial and the cost is minor, then we're much more likely to engage in that behavior. So if you're attempting to turn something that you don't actually enjoy doing into a habit, make sure that you do it in small steps, do a cost-benefit calculation, and then remind yourself of the result of that calculation every time you repeat that behavior. Now, there's a final piece to this puzzle, and it's called self-efficacy, which is just simply believing in yourself. A long time ago, a mentor of mine told me that if you argue for your limitations, they're yours, that you set your own limitations by believing in them. If I don't believe that I can do something, then I can't. Because if I don't believe that I can do it, I'll probably never even make the attempt. But if I believe in myself, if I know that I can do it, then I probably can. Even though I know it'll be hard, that sometimes I'll stumble and fall, that I'll have setbacks. I know that if I pick myself up and persist, if I take it in small increments and be consistent, I'll get there. If I can do a cost-benefit calculation and keep that reward in sight, I'll succeed. If I can remember that this isn't a sprint, that it's a marathon, and that I need to pace myself, I'll cross the finish line. And I'd like to leave you with this, a strategy that will help you in forming good habits and keeping your motivation up. Track your progress. Progress is important. Now, know this, that progress comes in fits and starts. It's not a steady state. You will make progress, and then you won't. And once in a while, you may even have a setback, even though you haven't been skipping any workouts or cheating on any meals. That's just the nature of progress. So it's important that you're diligent about tracking your progress. Keep a log of your progress and take measurements of your waist, chest, biceps, and thighs, and record those in your log on a regular basis. Get tested and record your test results. Keeping track of your body fat percentage, your blood pressure, and your weight. Be diligent about regularly taking photos of yourself and recording those in your log. Looking in the mirror, you probably won't be able to perceive any progress on a day-to-day basis, but going back over your tracking logs from several months or even from a year ago will demonstrate exactly the progress that you've made. And progress equals motivation. Knowing that you're making progress, that you're improving and establishing better habits, and that those habits are paying off, that can be a huge step towards staying motivated. Okay, I hope that you've enjoyed this video and this series on motivation. If you'd like to learn more about taking your newfound motivation and setting up a plan, check out this playlist. That's it for me. I'll catch you guys next week. For now, I'm out of here.